Hey y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to another video. This video, gonna be giving you another, little Black History Month type video for myself. So, if you haven't seen already, I already did a list on black characters in anime. So, for this video, we're gonna be doing black characters in Marvel Comics. Honestly, this list really ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be. I had no idea some of these characters even existed, and in doing my research, it made me really want to go back and, find out more about some of these characters. So, before we get into the video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, as well as hit that notification bell to get notified for more content that I put out. And if you enjoy the video, please be sure to hit me with a like, because of course that helps me, and leave a comment and let me know any characters I left off this list or you feel like shouldn't be on this list. So without any further ado, let's just get into it.
And I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all. I'm blickety black, blacker than black, I'm blacker than black.
First up on the list, we have Ryder, who's a hero who debuted in Skrull Kill Crew #1 in 1995. Next up, we have Snake Eyes, who's a villain who debuted in The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu #18 in 1975. Next, we have Postman, whose real name is David, who debuted in The Morlocks #1 in 2002. Next up, we have Kasper Cole, White Tiger / Black Panther, who's a hero who debuted in Black Panther #50 in 2002. Next up, we have Suicide, whose real name is Chris Daniels, who's kind of an anti-hero, who debuted in Ghost Rider #19 in 1991. Next up, we have Cardiac, whose real name is Elias Wortham, who's a hero who debuted in Amazing Spider-Man #342 in 1990. Next up, we have Midnight's Fire, whose real name is Aaron Cord, who's a hero who debuted in The New Warriors #2 in 1990. Next up, we have Aegis, whose real name is Trey Jason Rollins, who's a hero who debuted in The New Warriors #0 in 1999. Next, we have Thunderball, whose real name is Elliot Franklin, who's a villain who debuted in The Defenders #17 in 1974. Next up, we have 3D Man, whose real name is Delroy Garrett Jr., who's a hero who originally debuted as Triathlon in Avengers Volume 3, Issue 8 in 1998. Next up, we have Shatter, who debuted in Morlocks #1 in 2002. Next up, we have the Revenant, whose real name is Ezekiel Wright, who's a hero who debuted in Mystery Men #1 in 2011. Next, we have Scorcher, whose real name is Stephen Hudock, who debuted in Untold Tales of Spider-Man #1 in 1995. Next, we have Prodigy, whose real name is David Aline, who's a hero who debuted in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 4 in 2004. Next up, we have Gadget, who's a villain who debuted in Hero for Hire #2 in 1972. Next up, we have Rage, whose real name is Elvin Darrow Holiday, who's a hero that debuted in The Avengers #326 in 1990. Next up, we have Debrii, whose real name is Deborah Fields, who's a hero who debuted in The New Warriors #4 in 2005. Next up, we have Mr. Fish, whose real name is William Norris, who's a villain who debuted in Power Man #29 in 1976. Next, we have Slyde, whose real name is Jalone Beecher, who's a villain who debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man #272 in 1986. Next up, we have Curtis Carr, also known as Chemistro, who's a villain who debuted in Hero for Hire #12 in 1973. Next, we have Rocket Racer, whose real name is Robert Farrell, who's a former villain who debuted in Amazing Spider-Man issue #172 in 1977. Next up, we have Hardcore Cruz, who's a villain who debuted in Cage #1 in 1992. Next, we have Night Thrasher, whose real name is Dwayne Tyler, who's a hero who debuted in The Mighty Thor issue #411 in 1989. Next up, we have Nightshade, whose real name is Tilda Johnson, who's a hero who debuted in Captain America #164 in 1973. Next, we have Synch, whose real name is Everett Thomas, who's a hero who debuted in X-Men #36 in 1994. Next up, we have Abe Brown, or Abraham Brown, is also known as Black Tiger, who's a hero who debuted in The Deadly Hands of Kung Fu #1 in 1974. Next, we have Wildstreak, whose real name is Tamika Bowden, who's a hero who debuted in Fantastic Four Annual #26 in 1993. Next up, we have Bedlam, whose real name is Jesse Aronson, who's a hero who debuted in Factor X #1 in 1991. Next up, we have Coldfire, whose real name is James Lucas Jr., also Luke Cage's brother, who's a villain who debuted in Cage #13 in 1992. Next up, we have Shard Bishop, who is the sister of Lucas Bishop, who's a hero who debuted in the Uncanny X-Men Annual #17 in 1993. Next up, we have Thunderbolt, whose real name is Bill Carver, who's a hero who debuted in Daredevil #69 in 1970. Next up, we have Prowler, whose real name is Hobie Brown or Aaron Brown, who's a villain who debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 78 in 1969. Next up, we have Tom Foster, who ended up being Black Goliath, who's a hero who debuted in Black Panther Volume 3, issue number 23 in 2007. Next up, we have the original Black Goliath, William Barrett Foster, who's a hero who debuted in The Avengers Volume 1, issue number 32 in 1966. Next up, we have Tombstone, whose real name is Lonnie Thompson Lincoln, who's a villain who debuted in Web of Spider-Man number 36 in 1988. Next up, we have Lucas Bishop, who's a hero who debuted in Uncanny X-Men number 282 in 1991. Next up, we have Willis Stryker, who's a villain who debuted in Luke Cage, Hero for Hire number 1 in 1972. Next up, we have Daniel Drumm, who's a hero who debuted in Strange Tales number 169 in 1973. Next up, we have Brother Voodoo, whose real name is Jericho Drumm, the brother of Daniel Drumm, who debuted in Strange Tales number 169 as well in 1973. Next up, we have Cottonmouth, whose real name is Bershel Clemens, who's a villain who debuted in Captain America number 310 in 1985. Next up, we have Erik Killmonger, who's a villain who debuted in Jungle Action number 6 in 1973. Next up, we have Valkyrie. So for Valkyrie, I'm going to do something a little bit different here. Originally, Valkyrie debuted as a white character, but Valkyrie's MCU debut had her played by Tessa Thompson, and Valkyrie is a hero who debuted in Thor Ragnarok 2017. Next up, we have Spectrum, whose real name is Monica Rambeau, who debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16 in 1982. Next up, we have Misty Knight, who's a hero who debuted in Marvel Premiere number 21 in 1975. Next up, we have James Rhodes, who ends up being War Machine, who's a hero who debuted in Iron Man number 118 in 1979. Next up, we have Falcon, whose real name is Sam Wilson, who's a hero who debuted in Captain America number 117 in 1969. Next up, we have Isaiah Bradley, who ended up being Captain America, who's a hero that debuted in Truth, Red, White, and Black number 1 in 2003. Next up, we have Isaiah's grandson, Patriot, who's Elijah Bradley, who's a hero who debuted in Truth, Red, White, and Black number 7 in 2003. Next up, we have Cloak, whose real name is Tyrone Johnson, who's a hero that debuted in The Spectacular Spider-Man number 64 in 1982. Next up, we have Blue Marvel, whose real name is Adam Brasher, who's a hero who debuted in Adam, Legend of the Blue Marvel number 1 in 2008. Next up, we have Blade, who's a hero who debuted in The Tomb of Dracula number 10 in 1973. Next, we have Shuri, who debuted in Black Panther number 2 in 2005. Next, we have Luke Cage, also known as Power Man, who's a hero who debuted in Luke Cage Hero for Hire number 1 in 1972. Next, we have Nick Fury. If you know, Nick Fury was originally introduced as a white character, but the form that was inspired by Samuel L. Jackson debuted in Ultimate X-Men Marvel Team Up number 5 in 2001. Next up, we have Riri Williams, also known as Ironheart, who debuted in Invincible Iron Man Volume 2, number 7 in 2016. Next up, we have Miles Morales, also known as Spider-Man, who debuted in Ultimate Fallout number 4 in 2011. Next, we have Black Panther, whose real name is T'Challa, who's a hero who debuted in Fantastic Four number 52 in 1966. And lastly, to finish off the list, we have Storm, whose real name is Aurora Monroe, who's a hero who debuted in Giant Size X-Men number 1 in 1975. You know, that's it for the list, guys. I know it was long. I know there's probably a lot of people you've never even heard of. There's a lot of people I've never even heard of. So, you know what? Let's all together try to learn more about these black characters. And hopefully we can get some of these characters on the big screen, small screen, something. Because we all know representation matters.
Yo, because I'm black and I'm black. Yo, I'm black and I'm black, y'all. And I'm black and you're black and I'm black, y'all.
That's it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, as well as hit the notification bell to get notified for more content that I put out. As well as hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and leave a comment and let me know any other black heroes in Marvel Comics that I may have forgotten. With that being said, y'all, enjoy your life.
I'm feeling great and feel the vibe. I'm really grateful we alive. And I'm feeling great cause lately I've been on the way to something great. And I feel alive cause I create like every day and I'm on today.